The President of the Legislative Council. The Honorable Jeremy Tam. Mr. Chairman, Dr. K.K. Kwok spoke. I'm also his party member. I support everything he said, except for one point. He said that the policemen were acting like thugs, beating up people arbitrarily. I just want to say that I differ with him on this count. The thugs can never tell what sort of money they can make a month, and they can easily be arrested any time. For policemen, they have a steady income. They won't be arrested irrespective of the offenses that they have committed. And then they make political mileage for their brutality. Chris Tang got promoted, Dover got promoted. And then for the police force, we have got 3 senior police officers caught in a scandal. They have unauthorized works, renting out a house under the government land license, and they have used the traffic cones belong to the government, and he used it so as to occupy land to park his car. I think indeed it is a blatant case of abusing his public powers, using the public resources for his personal gain. Well, I am moving a CSA. I'm pinpointing the Civil Service Bureau. Well, Rule 69 Bracket 3 of the Rules of Procedures has been invoked by me. I would like to propose a cut of expenditure to the amount of $4.18 million, which is tantamount to the overall emolument for the Secretary for Civil Service in the year 2020-21. Not just Chris Tang should be bearing the responsibility. What about the Secretary for Civil Service? He must have seen that junior police officers in the past year openly challenged Mr. Matthew Chang, somebody who was way higher up the echelon than that person. At that time, the then CP, Stephen Low, didn't reprimand such civil servants. In fact, the Secretary for Civil Service should have come forward and should have pointed out that it was wrong to do so. This hasn't been done. This is all because they allowed politics to prevail above their neutrality, their professionalism. It seems that the civil service regulations are there for suppression of the dissenting voices rather than practicing political neutrality. Let me talk about the case of the former SCS, Mr. Joshua Law. It appears to me that there is a different yardstick. He was very strict in punishing the civil servants. For the social movement against the extradition bill, a number of civil servants were sort of sentenced before they stood trial, and they were interdicted. A policeman may arrest somebody, and then you'll be released on bail. If you don't apply for bail, what happens is that if the police have got enough evidence, then you will be taken to court, and then it all depends on the opinion of the court as to whether you will be granted bail. If you don't accept the bail conditions, then it's a different story. If you accept, then you need to be bailed out. So if you don't accept the offer to be bailed, then you are sort of revoking the bail. Now, if at that moment the police hasn't got enough evidence to take you to court, then that would be it. And therefore, I don't think it is reasonable in such a case to interdict a civil servant? Well, for each and every case, even for you, sir, Chairman, you don't know whether you will be arrested when you go to the street. Even if you are alone, you may be told that you have breached the prohibition on social gathering, on group gathering, and then you'll be arrested. So you can't say that just because you may be susceptible to arrest and so you have to be suspended from your duties. But that's what people have found themselves in, because I don't think I have broken the law, and so even though bail has been offered, I won't take it up. Well, more evidence may have been gathered in the future to lay a charge, but at the moment that bail conditions are not agreed to, then you're supposed to be a free man, and you should not have your personal movements being sort of restricted. You should be able to leave Hong Kong. You don't need to submit or surrender your travel documents because you haven't committed any crime. But how come that the Civil Service Bureau has interdicted such civil servants? So either you adopt the same yardstick, so that Police Dover and his guys, the three of them, should have been suspended from their duties. A house under the government land license. Is it your house? No. A family member of your wife? Who is he? Don't tell me that being a law enforcement agency, you don't know what's meant by a family member. Now, for the Home Affairs Department, I think the department has made it clear. It is a case of unlicensed operation as far as the house under the GLL that has been rented out. So what about the CSB? You are supposed to have made a declaration about it, and the rules have been laid down by the CSB. I'm sure the Secretary knows it. All senior ranking civil servants, I mean the 25 political appointees, as well as officials that have to be appointed by the Central People's Government, all of them need to declare whether they have got any part-time jobs, whether they have been running any business. And then such information will be made public. For other directorate grade officers, they also have to make a declaration. The only difference is that they don't need to make the information public. For the police force, the chief superintendents and other public officers at that rank or above would be regarded as directorate grade officers. And even before his promotion, he should have made a declaration about the business he would like to run, or being the main investor of that business. Now, the CP said that according to the police general orders, policemen are not being restricted from any sort of investment. I think he was giving us part of the truth. The CSB should have come out and cite the civil service regulations, because in the CSR it is clear that directorate grade officers do not merely make a declaration, they need to seek approval as well. The CSB should have come forward and should say that, yes, for the police force statement, it is correct, but that is applicable to the general police officers and not applicable to police officers in the directorate grade. The CSB failed to clarify this point. You may say that Patrick Nip is new to the post and he's not familiar with the arrangements. But don't forget that Mr. Nip has been a civil servant for over 30 years. Well, in earlier reports, the following point was made. For the post of Secretary for Civil Service, Well, you need to identify somebody from the senior civil servants, and the post holder has the revolving door. In other words, after leaving the post of SCS, he can go back to the civil service. The design is such that the SCS is the only exception in relation to the arrangements for political appointees. Like Mr. Frank Chen, he was the Director of Electrical and Mechanical Services. For political appointees like him, they can never revert back to the civil service. The only exception would be the Secretary for Civil Service. We have this exception because we need somebody who is not outside of the civil service to take up the post. We need somebody who is well versed in the civil service matters. And then in the selection process, it means that we need to select somebody who can withstand the pressure on behalf of the civil servants, or if it is found that civil servants are forced to abandon political neutrality, then the SCS is supposed to withstand the influence on behalf of the civil servants. So he should have come forward to make sure that he won't be the first one to damage the civil service system. And that's why we have such a special arrangement, such an exception for the SCS. Now, we haven't been told as to whether Mr. Patrick Nip can go back to the civil service. I think in theory he can't, because when he became the Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, he left the civil service. In other words, for the incumbent Secretary for Civil Service, he hasn't got this particular privilege, that is, he can't go back to the civil service. But then that begs the question, will he be safeguarding the rights and interests of the civil service? Is he going to uphold political neutrality of the civil service because he has gone down the point of no return? Currently, civil servants are facing a possible need to take an oath to pledge allegiance. The other day, I put this question to the secretary. He counted himself unlucky. He's new to the post, and he had to answer my question. Well, there was an interpretation of the basic law in relation to the taking of oath in the electrical. Now, if we are talking about senior officials being forced to take an oath, you may say that you pledge allegiance to the SAR government as well as the People's Republic of China. But then the interpretation of the basic law is such that you pledge allegiance to the SAR government and the CPG, the People's Republic of China. Don't forget that we have got ethnic minorities. From the perspective of the PRC's constitution, they are not Chinese, they are not of Chinese ethnicity. In India, in Pakistan, we have got Hong Kongers being stranded there. They turned to the Chinese consulate for assistance. They didn't get any help. Why? Because they are of Indian ethnicity. They are of Pakistani origin. So the Chinese consulate told them that they aren't Chinese nationals. And that's been reflected in our immigration ordinance. If you try to apply for a home return permit, you don't get it if you are of Indian origin or Pakistani ethnicity. So if you apply this logic, and if you impose the need to take an oath on everybody, on the one hand, you don't recognize him as a Chinese national, and yet you are asking him to pledge allegiance to the PRC, to the CPG. So I don't think you can ask them to do so. You have been applying different yardsticks. You are suppressing the rights. Whether you are a policeman or whether you work for the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department, in my eye, there should be only one kind of civil servants, dedicated, politically neutral, etc. But we don't see this happening again. Thank you.
Mr. Tonglisi. Thank you, Chairman. In my second reading speech, I quoted the lyrics of Sam Hui, a song by Sam Hui, helping one another when we are on the same boat. And then the chairman of the 4 associations in my sector also joined in a song. The name is called We're in the Same Boat and We Should Help One Another to Fight the Epidemic. However, I think the Pan-Democrats are those with this we burn, you burn with us mentality. They have no intention to fight the epidemic. They just want the boat of Hong Kong to sink. They want the whole community to sink with them. And when civil servants do not want to succumb to the pressure, the mentality of Pan-Democrats is to ensure that they do not get paid. They even want to scrap the expenses for the whole department so that they will stop operation and they can stop serving the public. These members have altogether proposed 156 amendments to the appropriation bill, and only 52 have been approved by your chairman. As expected, many of them relate to the police force. They want to cut the fees for informants. They would like to cut the estimates for the Marine Police and to buy police vehicles. They even want to cut the operating expenses for the police force. I think it's because they are not happy with the performance and the enforcement action by the police during the anti-extradition bill round. I'm a member of IPCC. I have dealt with many cases, many complaints against the police. Many of the allegations are not because now, even though there may be allegations against the police, that doesn't mean that we should cut the expenses for informant fees, for procurement of equipment, and not to allow 30,000 police officers to go to work and be paid. The security panel of the council just yesterday discussed the overall law and order situation in Hong Kong in 2019. In the first half of last year, the crime figures were the lowest in 42 years since the start of the statistics in 1977. However, starting from the middle of last year, we had the turmoil, and then as a result, the crime figures for last year rose 9%, and then there was a marked reduction in detection rate and triad figures and domestic violence, etc. The crime statistics dropped. As the police explained, it's not because we had fewer drug addicts or less domestic violence. Rather, it's because the police had their hands tied in dealing with violence on the streets, and there were fewer police officers available to patrol our streets. And as a result, those figures dropped as a result. Now, if the estimates for the police are cut, then police stations will be forced to close down, and all police officers will be forced to take no pay leave, and they may, the whole police force may have to be disbanded, as suggested by the black-clad violent protesters. And the crime rate in Hong Kong would then hit a record low because there'll be nobody to enforce the law or to keep statistics. And if you want to report a crime to the police, there'll be nobody to serve you. Hong Kong will then will be the most violent and a lawless city, a great departure from what we used to be when we were among the safest cities in the world. I don't know whether those who adopt this mentality of we burn, you burn with us, want to see. Well, they do not just target the police, they also target the Electoral Commission as well as the Home Affairs Department. They have proposed amendments to cut the estimates for paying the electoral legal advisor, the Secretary General, perhaps, and also the pay for district officers. Perhaps this is because these public officers do not want to act according to the wish of these very radical legislators who want the whole of Hong Kong to burn with them. For government policies and measures and departments and the performance of individual officials, I have expressed dissatisfaction in the past. However, I'm not going to use any language violence. I will not ask people to go to hell or for the whole family to be doomed. I will not adopt this approach by these legislators. They would take revenge against people who don't agree with them. For instance, Mr. Ray Chan have moved amendments to the Lands Department, the Buildings Department, and even the Government Property Agency. He wants to cut their provisions. Perhaps he's not happy with these departments. Well, I have criticized these departments in the past, including the Lands Department and the Buildings Department. When it comes to enforcement of illegal occupation of government land, they have been very slow in taking action. However, I'm not going to cut the expenses as a result. Rather, I would support appropriate increase in resources so that they will have sufficient manpower and resources to take enforcement action and to tackle illegal occupation of government land in Hong Kong and unauthorized building structures. And we should also amend the law to enhance the penalty and to streamline law enforcement procedures. In Hong Kong, land is expensive, and these offenders can make hundreds of thousands of dollars in occupying land illegally. However, the usual fine is a few tens of thousands of dollars and sometimes just a few $1,000s. So there is no deterrent effect. No matter how hard departments want to enforce the law, their efforts become futile. There are a few more amendments to other bureaus and departments. I have strong views about some of them too. For the Secretary of Bureau of Environment, it hasn't done a good job in monitoring oil prices. It has not been successful in reducing pollution to allow everyone to lead a healthier and greener lives. Now we are considering a bill on the charging scheme of domestic waste. I think the whole design is not people-oriented. The Transport Department as well as the Highways Department are also not people-oriented when it comes to public transport planning and infrastructure. Their approach is road and vehicle-oriented. That affects the quality of life of our people. For the Department of Justice and the Education Bureau and the Government Information Services, I'm not happy with the performance during the anti-extradition bill round. The prosecution by the Department of Justice is far too slow, and because of blunders they made, some of the defendants have been acquitted, and the Education Department has not handled the problem of inappropriate teaching materials, and the Government Information Services has a lot to improve on when it comes to refuting fake news. In the subcommittee on West Kowloon Cultural District, I said that, well, we have waited for far too long before the cultural facilities in WKCD can be commissioned. We don't even have a timetable for that. However, in the current epidemic, the Home Affairs Bureau has done a very good job in supporting private residential developments and property management agencies, and they have also responded very swiftly in helping the cleaning workers of contractors. So I think they deserve a pat on their back, and I hope that the new Secretary for Home Affairs can keep up with their good efforts. The pro-establishment camp is the majority in this council. I'm sure these dozens of amendments proposed by these burners will be vetoed. But if they become the majority in this council, then they will be in control of this council. They will have the power to summons anyone they want or to veto motions. Then only departments or bureaus that succumb to their wish will be paid. Anyone who support the police to enforce the law properly, that support stability and prosperity and to support the country's development will be denied of the service they deserve. I really don't want to see that day. With these remarks, I oppose all the amendments by members. Thank you.
Dr. Elena Wong. Chairman, I speak on the amendments that I've moved as well as the relevant amendments moved by other colleagues. I'd like to focus on a number of points. First, about political reform. I propose to delete the amount equivalent to the annual salary of the Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs. He has over $4 million of salary every year. But I think Hong Kong is degenerating, and those to blame, well, what is to blame is because of the non-democratic system of our political structure. And people are suffering right now. Some establishment or loyalist colleagues blame us for dragging Hong Kong down, but we've always been saying that why is Hong Kong falling? It's because of our existing political system, which lags behind and it's ineffective in striking a balance between people of different views. Well, now that the Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs has been replaced and we have a new secretary, no matter who that is or no matter how many replacements we will have, if we continue to have this political system, there will be no way out. The basic law of Hong Kong has promised Hong Kong people for gradually entering into a democratic stage. We will gradually have democracy and popular election. However, nothing has been moved over the years. On the other hand, we see people from the establishment camp and also people from the Hong Kong and Macau office and the liaison office pushing forward for the legislating Article 22. And they even say that this task should be completed within this year. So actually, who is dragging Hong Kong down? It's not because the loyalists, including the Secretary for Security, who are working so hard to push the Fugitive Offenders Bill, we will not be facing this predicament. it's as if they are still not satisfied, and now they even push for the legislation for Article 23. Now that they have the Hong Kong coalition newly established, it's actually useless. You are leading Hong Kong to another dead end only. If we really want Hong Kong to improve, I think the Carrie Lam government and also the Constitution and Mainland Affairs Bureau and the Security Bureau, they are things that you should do and things that you shouldn't do at all. For instance, the legislation for Article 23. The thing that you should do right now is to start political reform and to gradually have universal suffrage for Hong Kong. But we haven't heard any progress on this front, nothing from the CMAB nor from the Carrie Lam government. So I think the CMAB is not doing a good job, and the government is not doing a good job either. From the umbrella movement up to now, I think the government has been doing worse and worse, and Carrie Lam has been condoning on the police force and asking the police force and putting a blind eye on the police brutality. From last June to now, there are already thousands of young people who have been arrested and injured. And for those who have been detained, we just heard that there were incidents reporting that they have been tortured inside the behind bars. And of course, the police have the right to arrest people. However, after arresting them, you do not have the right to impose physical harm on them. Neither do you have the right to beat young people up and shoot rubber bullets, rounds of rubber bullets, and also beanbag bullets on them. Well, did the Commissioner of Police stop this kind of police brutality? No, none at all. We heard John Lee speech and also Chris Tang's speech when they were in the LegCo. We heard them saying that there is no existence of police brutality. They don't see any such sign at all, and they don't agree to this kind of accusation. I asked them what didn't they agree. They couldn't even reply. They just said that they just denied that this kind of incidents have occurred. When citizens could see it very clearly, the police could still turn a blind eye to it. And John Lee even said that the protesters in the past 6 months had dug out tons of bricks and also hurling bricks on police officers, and Hong Kong is no longer the safest city in the world. And he also said that the young people had to suffer and they did not have a future anymore, and they were actually used by people behind the scene. Well, Chris Tang is also saying the same thing. Problem is that John Lee has no evidence, and what he said is totally ungrounded. And Chris Tang is also very complacent and arrogant and really angered people who heard him. Chairman, in the past 10 months or so, we have seen police brutality, blatant police brutality, and under the leadership of John Lee and Chris Tang, the police force has been totally degenerated, and there is a great rift between Hong Kong people and the police force. The popularity rate for the police has hit the record low. So that is the reason why the Secretary for Security and also the CP should not have a further salary raise. In fact, they should be criticized. The CE should also be responsible for what we are seeing now. In fact, the Hong Kong officials are politically appointed. Those politically appointed officials, PAOs, do not have to be accountable. They are no longer accountable for the faults that they have made. I think this is totally unacceptable. Some people asked, well, there's nothing we could do. We have one country, two system. Now the Hong Kong Macau office and the Chinese liaison office are calling the shots, and there's nothing the Hong Kong government can do. But if we look further, just look at Macau. Macau is also under one country, two systems. But we can see that this chief executive of Macau is very bold and daring to fight for the interests of the Macau people. He is very prompt in his action and brisk in his action. When Macau didn't have face mask, the CE would look for the face mask elsewhere in the world, and not turning to mainland, to the central government for supply. Hong Kong is also having one country, two systems. How come our CE is doing so badly? Is it because the central government does not allow you to do anything, or is it because of your own incompetency? So, Chairman, if Hong Kong is to relaunch and to start again, I think we really have to focus on the crux of the problem, and that is our political system. Our CE and our government are not standing by the side of Hong Kong people and not protecting the interests and freedom of Hong Kong. If the CE does not have the determination and resolve to run Hong Kong and to protect the rights and freedom of Hong Kong people, then I think we are not having one country, two systems anymore. We are actually lowering ourselves and being led by the Western District, that is the liaison office. And the CE is just working below him. So what's the point of talking about the future of Hong Kong? What's the point of forming the Hong Kong coalition with people only from the establishment camp and the leftists? This is not the way to go, and it can never save Hong Kong. I think we have to revert and look at the problem from the root. Chairman, when we talk about the police, I think 15 minutes is not enough. I'd like to talk about the Food and Health Bureau and also the FHB, Food and Health Bureau. Well, I propose to reduce or to cut the annual salary payment of the Secretary for Food and Health for the whole year. Well, Professor Sylvia Chan is hardworking. However, in fighting the COVID-19 virus, I think she is not up to our expectation. And Professor Yun from Hong Kong U, when he was interviewed by the Chinese TV program by Ms. Wu Xiaoli, he mentioned that in December 24th last year, the Christmas Eve, well, actually on that day, he had already informed Secretary for Food and Health that he believed that there is a major outbreak of a virus similar to SARS on the mainland, and he suspected that there was serious outbreak of the virus on mainland China because he had exchanges with the mainland people, and he knew that something serious was happening. Even though Professor Yun changed his words, he said that this was not the December of 24th of December, but 31st of December. But no matter whether it is the Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, it is the end of December that Professor Yun had informed Professor Sylvia Chan that there was something happening on mainland China and Hong Kong should get prepared. However, we didn't see Professor Chan doing anything after receiving the warning from Professor Yun. He didn't send anybody up to the mainland to check what's going on. Well, after from January 5th, the mainland China had not been very open in releasing information about what was happening on mainland China. And so the epidemic spread from mainland to Hong Kong very quickly. So the problem is, we mentioned frequently, many times, that we should not rely solely on what mainland Chinese officials said. We should really study or examine the situation by ourselves. China and WHO had, at the beginning, tried to play down the danger of the outbreak of the virus. And in January, they even said that there was very low opportunities for the virus to be transmitted, to have human-to-human transmission. And January 15, Dr. Zhong Nansan then said that there was the possibility of human transmission of the virus. And then on the 23rd, Wuhan was locked down. So at that time, the virus had already been spread throughout the world, because by the time Wuhan city was closed, there were 5 million people who had already left the city. They went to different cities and different parts of mainland China, to Hong Kong, and to a lot of places in the world. So that is the reason why we are seeing outbreaks of the epidemic throughout the world. Wuhan pneumonia is not an official term. The WHO has already clearly stated that this should be named COVID-19. Helena Wong, please continue. Well, Chairman, I think some people are just having this problem of political cleanliness, so-called, because Beijing said the term Wuhan pneumonia should not be used, and they now insisted that this term should not be used. Actually, everybody in the world knows where it comes from, Chairman. So I propose to reduce or to cut out the annual salary of Secretary for Food and Health, because she had ignored the reminder or have ignored the situation and have not done what she should have done to prevent the outbreak of the virus. So this is the responsibility not only of Professor Chen, but also of the CE, Carrie Lam. If we could close the borders as earlier, then we would not have our frontline healthcare staff would not have to work so hard to keep it down. Well, please come back. Please stop. Mr. Liu Changguang.
Mr. Chairman, I speak in objection to the CSAs under items 26 to 32 in relation to the police expenditure. Well, in the past, we used to be called one of the safest cities on the earth, but then we have had the anti-extradition bill movement. According to The Economist, for the 2019 index, we used to occupy the 9th place. Now it is down to the 20th in relation to the safest city in the world. And then in relation to the 2019 ranking table for the most competitive cities in China, instead of occupying the topmost seat, we are now the 13th city that is most competitive. In the past year, we had 59,200 plus cases of crime, an increase of 5,000, an increase of 9.2%. For the first half of last year, when compared with the same period 2018, there was a fall of 4.7%. But then since July last year, there was this movement against the Fugitive Offenders Bill. There was a lot of violence. And as a result, the overall crime figures of 2019 went up again, the first time since year 2007. Violent crime surged. And then there were a lot more young people breaching the law. And 40% of those arrested in the protests were aged between 10 and 20. There is over 2,000 of them. For young people who have been arrested, there were 4,000 of them when compared with 2018, an increase of 1,400. so an increase of 54.1%. For those who were found to have committed an offense under the appropriate order ordinance, like unlawful assembly, etc., there were 1,600 of them, an increase of 21%. So do you think that it is a case of civil disobedience, but then they are increasing the crime rate and they are affecting the livelihood of people? Well, we need the police force to safeguard our stability. They crack down on crime, they protect our lives and properties. And in fact, it is a cornerstone for our stability and prosperity. They maintain the law and order. They will detect crime. They maintain road safety. They will counter terrorism. Well, in fact, the police force play an important role, an essential role that cannot be replaced. Now, if you want to cut the expenditure for the police force, as well as the rewards and special services, or the money to be spent on witnesses, prisoners and deportees, all of them, if realized, would affect the normal functioning of the police force. So this will be done at the expense of our safety. It is a matter of you burn with us mentality. Well, the police force has become the attention of everybody. This is because of 2 points. First, their estimates will go up drastically. And second, there are people who are not happy with the way the police performed. It is said that it is tantamount to using public money for the police to get more weapons against the people. First of all, whether we support the amount of money needed, we have to find out whether it is justified. Now, according to the police force, there are 4 major programs: maintaining law and order, prevention and detection of crime, road safety, etc. In the year 2020-21, as far as the estimates are concerned, when compared with 2019-2020, the revised estimates, there has been an increase of $842 million, etc. And then for the increase in manpower, 1,132 more. And for other programs, 407 more. The third program, 38 more, and 966 more posts for the fourth program. Well, we have seen that there are very serious cases in which people would like to manufacture bombs, jeopardizing the safety and security of Hong Kong. We can never take it lightly. Now, for the past 6 months, we have the outbreak of the epidemic. But then recently, the epidemic has eased. And so at Tai Kwu Shing, at IFC, we have seen the re-emergence of protests. And in fact, they are breaching the prohibition on group gathering regulation. They have also been flying the flag of Hong Kong independence. And in fact, a 15-year-old young person threw a petrol bomb at a police vehicle. Now, throughout the world, there are controversies as to how we define terrorism. But then the broad consensus is that you have a religious, political, or other ideological objective, and you deliberately attack civilians, and you will be reckless as to whether they are safe or not. In the movement against the Fugitive Offenders Bill, whether the aspiration are praiseworthy or not, but then for you to resort to petrol bombs and other weapons, you have to bear in mind that they will kill without discrimination. We have already seen budding terrorism. It isn't a wide allegation. In recent months, the government has already cracked down on a number of weapon factories. explosives, 2.6 tons of chemicals, a laboratory for bombs, handguns, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, etc. The healthcare workers would like the borders to be closed, but then at Caritas Hospital, at Lo Wu train station, at the Hong Kong Shenzhen Bay port, bombs were found, and in fact, we have also seen that many people would uphold the idea that they can breach the law so as to have justice done. And in fact, they are saying that they are willing to be martyrs. So indeed, it is important for us to increase the manpower of the police and to update and upgrade their ammunition and their equipment. Now, it seems that the mentality of I burn, you burn with us mentality is sort of reviving. There are many of us who would like to see the restoration of law and order. We would like to see life going back to the normal. For the police force to get more equipment to protect our lives and properties so that we have a stable environment, I think the police force should have our support. Now, we need to fill the positions, and yet if you say that this is a matter of wasting our hard-earned money, what about the LC complex, traffic lights, MTRC station equipments, all of them have been sort of damaged and vandalized. We need public money to repair them. Well, what is more important is to have proper personnel management. Well, some people are worried about the approach adopted by the police force, and they are using this as an excuse to veto the appropriation bill. They say that this is the reason why they are moving Csas. According to Section 10 of the Police Force Ordinance, the police force has got the statutory duty to maintain public order and uphold public safety. If there are road blockages, violent conflicts, etc., jeopardizing the peace, then the police force must act swiftly in a professional way after forming a judgment. They need to restore law and order as soon as possible. Basic Law, Article 27, does say that the people of Hong Kong have freedom of speech, of the press, publication, of association, and of assembly, of procession, etc. There were 9,900 cases of procession and demonstration. Many of them degenerated into unlawful and violent acts like arson, hurling bricks, throwing petrol bombs, vandalism, damaging shops, unlawful or illegal detention, arson, murder, serious harm being done to others. I think we've seen them all. University campuses have become the production base for petrol bombs, and this is unprecedented. If you breach the law, you have to bear the responsibility. For the law enforcement officers to turn a blind eye to crime happening right before them, it is wrong. Now, for the police force, of course, there are guidelines for them to use force. In terms of the use of force, in terms of characters and conducts, well, there might be some black sheep in the police force. Some of them might have resorted to excessive use of force. But then, for many months, Hong Kong was ravaged by violence that was verging on craziness, but no one has lost their lives as a result. On the other hand, someone was killed by the acts of the rioters, and I think it shows what actually happened. The key point is whether we have a good mechanism to handle the cases and to rectify the situation. Well, we have got the ICAC dealing with police officers who have accepted bribery, we have the IPCC to oversee the complaints against the police. There are also internal disciplinary mechanisms. For the IPCC's report, it will be ready in May. It was supposed to look at the events between the 9th of June and the 1st of July 2019, but in fact, the study scope was expanded to include controversial issues of close concern to the public, like Yunlong incident on the 21st of July, as well as the August 31st incident at Prince Edward Station. Now, the report will be out soon. I think there will be recommendations to improve the performance of the police force. Now, if it is found that the IPCC hasn't got the investigative powers, then maybe we cannot rule out the possibility that there will be another sort of institution to look into the matter. Now, Hong Kong is highly sort of polarized. For this year, people are concerned about the substantial increase in the money to be given to the police force. But then at the same time, we see that people are using all sorts of means to get their demands. I think it is necessary for us to increase the funding for the police force for them to carry out their job. So I'm against the CSAs under items 26 to 32. Thank you.
Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Thank you, Chairman. Every year we have large amount of amendments from the opposition camp when we consider the appropriation bill. They may use all sorts of excuses, but I think they are just the same every year. Departments that strike a raw nerve or undermine their interests will see expenses being cut by these Democrats. And if they don't like a certain public officer, they will propose to cut his pay or cut expenses for that department. But I don't think there is any government official that please their eyes. I think the purpose is to oppose for the sake of opposing, filibustering for the sake of filibustering, political gesturing. They want to build up force against the government. They would like to block the administration. They would like to block the passage of the bill so that Hong Kong can burn with them. However, this year, the opposition camp has been kind. They've only proposed 142 amendments to the bill, an all-time low in the recent 8 years. Is because under the rules of procedure, the chairman has cut frivolous amendments, and the chairman has also controlled the debate time of amendments so that we can have an effective debate. And I think this move is welcome by the public, and we do appreciate your efforts. And this is also to ensure that the bill can be considered within a reasonable period of time so that members of the public can benefit from the various support measures proposed in the bill. In particular, in the appropriation bill this year, we have measures to help the public to fight the epidemic, and they are badly needed by the public. Perhaps the opposition camp thinks that they cannot filibuster forever, so they may as well propose fewer amendments, though it is necessary to put up to a stage political gestures. Well, I think, Chairman, you've been lenient this year. You have allowed 52 of the amendments, the highest percentage in recent years. So politics is about compromise. I think we should adopt an attitude of mutual respect. We should play by the rules of the games, and this will facilitate the operation of the Council. Chairman, for the opposition camp, that like to leverage whatever support they have should learn from you to ensure effective operation of the council, in particular when we deal with the appropriation bill, which is so important to the whole community. We should adopt this attitude, and we should discharge our duties in accordance with the basic law instead of having to hold a dozen or so meetings as yet to return a chairman. They failed to return a chairman after so many meetings. This goes to show that they are so incompetent and they are thick-skinned than ordinary people. If we look at the amendments from the opposition camp and also proposed cut to expenses of departments, I think needless to say we can tell that they are the Csas office, the salaries for the bureau secretaries, the police force, and even the salary of our general secretary. These are people that they don't like. They claim that they like to monitor the proper spending of public funds. Then why should they support the rioters to break public facilities? They broke the lifts and traffic lights, and we have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to repair these public facilities. And as a result of the vandalism, many people, those who have impaired mobility in particular, have been seriously affected. So the opposition camp has double standards. There is no need to study very carefully what they want to cut. Take the spending for the police force as an example. I really want to cut the provisions for the police as well, because if we have less street violence, if we have good law and order, then police officers don't need so much OT allowance and so much equipment to tackle the rioters. But without such equipment, perhaps the fatalities on the part of police officers will even be worse. When without these riots, then there is no need to provide so much resources to the police, who have misled our youngsters into doing chaos to society when they hid away from such chaos, and who claimed that you should take pride in your being arrested. I think these lawless and misleading remarks, who made such remarks? From a barrister in Hong Kong. So the opposition camp don't really care for the rule of law and also due procedures. Now, the interpretation of one country, two system is to ask the Central People's Government to not to do anything about Hong Kong. They should allow them to secede the country, and the central government cannot take any action. And when they went to the States and the UK to beg other people to interfere in our affairs and to ask them to sanction our home, they regard such things as for granted. And I think no one in Hong Kong agreed to them. And I think they have done so much because they want Hong Kong to burn with them. I think they would want everyone to become jobless, and we should all starve, and all companies should close. And I think this is what they are after. They want the whole world or Hong Kong to revolve around them so that they can find their own value. we have gone through half a year of riots, and the last few months of epidemic have caused Hong Kong to come to a standstill, and many enterprises are in dire situation. The epidemic has just started to ease, and I must praise the SL government for having done an excellent job in fighting the epidemic. In the past 10 days or in the past 2 weeks, the number of confirmed cases has been very low. In the past few days, we have very low figures in terms of our health care and our equipment and things. We have done a very good job, and yet some people are still criticizing the government. I think this is the time for us to stand united to fight the epidemic, and let's not create trouble. All right. The community has just regained its vibrancy, and all of a sudden, verbal violence and also social activities have come back because their masters need such things. They need such things to shirk the responsibility of not doing a good job in fighting the epidemic. They want chaos in the mainland. Such a frivolous and useless amendments. I hope the opposition can reflect on themselves and to ask themselves why have they joined politics in the first place. I, in fact, have a lot more to say, but I will not use up my time because I want the bill to be passed as soon as possible. With these remarks, I oppose all the amendments. Thank you.
Holden Chow. Thank you, Chairman. On our desk, we see the amendments, 52 altogether, moved by the pan-democratic members. I agree to what Mr. Lam Kin Fong had said. Of course, this is just their gimmick. They just want to move these amendments to cut the provisions for various departments. The first target that they have is the police force. We can see from the CSAs that many of them are about cutting the provision for the police force. Well, in fact, in the past period of time, when we were having discussion on fund allocation and also on the budget, etc., we could see time and again that the pan-democratic councillors are targeting their criticism against the Hong Kong police force. Well, it seems that the police force is responsible for everything that has gone wrong. They are just pinpointing the police force and blame them for everything. And because of that, they said that because the police has not been doing a good job, and so they have to stop moving forward. They have to cut the provision for the police force. That's their rationale and that's their gimmick. Well, recently, a lot of people talk about burning together. Yeah, you burn with me. This is their mentality. They said that the Legislative Council, or if they could win the more seats, that is 35 seats plus 1 in the legislature, then they would be able to burn or to make the entire LegCo burn with them. Well, they even say it out loud that they would not pass any bills or any fund allocation application because they do not care about the livelihood of the people. Well, this because the livelihood of the people is not in their mind. They only want to gain political mileage and they don't give a damn to the people. A couple of days ago, we saw the Commissioner of Police coming to the legislature, and in his speech, he said very clearly and pointed out the motive of these people. Well, this is really very accurate, and it's well said. But then, these people, they are bold enough to do all this kind of destruction, but then they do not have the guts to come out and to admit it. Well, let's look at what Lam Cheuk-ting said yesterday when he was speaking against the Commissioner of Police. He wanted to ask Chris Tang, and he said, I am not for violence. He keeps saying that I am against violence. It seems that he is cutting himself or cleaning his hands off and saying that he is not involved and he is not for violence. But then this is a very clear example. Lam Cheuk-ting is a case in point. He is just inciting people and asking the youngsters to go to the street, but then he is hiding behind the scene. Remember the stickler of the Democratic Party member, Lam Chi-kin? He became a victim. Lam Chi-kin reported the case to the police, but then after investigation, he was the one prosecuted. He wanted to have appeal, but then the court rejected it, and he had to bear the responsibility. This is a criminal case. But then Lam Cheuk-ting is even worse because he asked Lam Chi-kin to hold a press briefing, and he actually taught him how to report the case to the police. Can you come back to the theme? Okay, Chairman, I'll do that. Well, this is just an example of those people asking people to go to the street and carry out violence. However, he himself is hiding behind the scene. So we can see the theory of these people, of the burn with me mentality group. They are inciting a lot of violence in society. However, in public, they keep saying that they are clean from that. They are not involved and they are not for violence. But actually, when you look at it, they are the one who are reaping the benefits. They are gaining political mileage from this. When you look at the amendments right in front of us, as mentioned before, many of the amendments are targeted against the police force. And this is their goal. They just want to gain the support of the people so that, and also incite hatred among people against the police so that they could gain people's support. And they submitted this kind of CSAs and to target their criticism against the police. And they even go as far as saying that they would want the whole society to burn with them, to drag the society down with them. And they said that if the people of Hong Kong are not in line with them, if they do not support them in criticizing the police, then the whole society will burn with them. That means if society are not on their side, they will just stall the entire progress or operation of the legislature. This is the entire theory behind them. Of course, people of Hong Kong can see it very clearly, and they have discernment. After this period of epidemic in Hong Kong, we know that Hong Kong economy has been seriously affected. Every day we hear people complaining that they have lost their job, the society is suffering a great deal, and is actually in a stalemate. This is actually like a natural disaster. However, for the burn with me people, this group of people, they are actually conducting human error. They just destroy our society because of what they've done. We are just preparing to restart and to when the epidemic situation is easing. However, these people are now trying to incite the young people to come to take to the street again and then to have street violence again. They are so hypocritical, and the worst is that they just incite people to go out to do violent acts, but then they are hiding behind the scene. So, Chairman, today I'd like to make use of this opportunity to tell clearly the people of Hong Kong about the situation and to look very clearly about the motive behind all these proposed CSAs, especially those CSA on the reduction or the cutting of provision to the police force. Well, these are to spread hatred among the people against the police. And also, I'd like to ask a question. If we let these amendments be approved, then the frontline police officers will suffer because they are the ones bearing the brunt. And just imagine what will happen when the petrol bombs are hurled against at the police station, and also there are violence against police officers on the street. And it is highly likely that fatality may result. Not just about petrol bombs, there are also arson on the street. These kind of local terrorist acts become very prevalent, and they still have the cheek to move these CSAs and ask for cutting of provision to the police force. Do you guys really want to destroy the entire police force? You want to kill all the officers? You are just trying to use the knife or ask the young people to do that for you. The police officers on the street are doing their duties diligently, even risking their lives. If you want to cut their provision, if you really cut their provisions, then they have no more arms, no more additional, no more adequate provision. They are not properly equipped, then they will be very dangerous and they will be exposed to violence. So I think these people, the burn with me people, are just they are just evil. They just want the police force to burn with them, or they just want to drag down the police force. So I really think that we have the responsibility to tell the public about these terrible deeds of the Burn With Me group of councillors, and I would vote against these CSAs.
Dr. Chang Chung Tai, thank you. For this session, there are 42 heads about which CSAs have been moved. Before I actually embark on my topic, I just want to reiterate once again, for this appropriation bill, I have a different stance. Secretary, I think you are clear. I haven't moved any CSAs. This is because for this particular budget, I believe that we have been focusing on two areas. First of all, the cash handout of $10,000, how and should it be done? And the second one is about the drastic increase in the money for the police force. Well, in particular, for the second point, many pandemics are of the view that they should remove the additional money to be given to the police force so as to expand their ammunition and their weapons. What I want to point out that under the rule of Carrie Lam, I don't think we can separate the police force from the rest of the administration. I think it is very clear. Carrie Lam isn't the CE, strictly speaking. She is taking orders from the political will of the police force. So for this budget, I don't think there's any room and there's no need to propose the so-called CSAs. This is because the budget itself is such that for the government, there's only one purpose, that is to extend and continue with the police governance of Carrie Lam. I think today is a very special day, and it is related to the CSAs mentioned by other members. Today, we have been given this face mask. We have been given this face mask and has been sent to our office. Yesterday, it was a lot of fanfare. It seems that after the plague, now eventually the government has come up with a magical device. Well, this is a mask. It is not the underpants of an old lady. Now, there are administrative procedures for you to get registered, and then a third-party service provider will make arrangements for the postman to deliver it to your home. Now, I want to point out that for this particular piece of cloth, over 1.4 million Hong Kongers have already registered to get one. I think the government should be happy about it. Frank Chen, well, yesterday you made an announcement about this reusable mask. You can use it for 60 times. Today, 1.4 million Hong Kongers have registered. What do you make of this figure? My understanding is simple. 1.4 million. 1.4 million. What does it tell us? It tells you that Hong Kong is a city that is easy to govern. It's really easy. It isn't a matter of whether it is an important mask. Well, I think it's a matter of degeneration. That is, whoever has the mask to give you will be king. Well, Joshua Wong got the applause because he was able to get 100,000 more votes. Now the pro-establishment camp has got another round of applause when they're able to give out masks. Now ultimately, the Hong Kong government can give away the mask. I think the 1.4 million who have registered are sort of praising the Hong Kong government. Do you know that Hong Kong is a metropolitan city? We are the place where the East meets the West. We're supposed to have a metropolitan status. But today, the mask tells you everything. It isn't a matter of whether it is a nice-looking one. Let's talk about the ordinary citizens. Well, it is very easy to govern the ordinary citizens. Many pandemics have already told you about the reasons. They talked about police brutality, they told you about the police force, but then it all boils down to one single point. If a government has to count on its police force to maintain the order of the society, and if you can only count on the police force, it means that the city can no longer develop itself, because the cost will be very expensive. Now you try to distribute a few pamphlets and then you deploy 200 policemen. It's very costly. You open a shop and then it's a small business, but then there are just some slogans for the yellow camp, and then you send 2 teams of police officers there. So in our society, if we are a city that we can only count on the police force to maintain order, I'm not actually talking about law and order. Law and order is about whether you breach the law, whether you commit a crime. There's a narrow sense. Now, if the society can only maintain its order just because we have the police force, then the city has no future. What I want to say is that this mask tells you the story. Hong Kong is a place that's easy to govern. But how come that we find ourselves in this trouble? I can tell you that Hong Kong is getting more and more ungovernable. Just last week, Mr. Paul Chan, the FS, I'm still talking about the budget. Just a few days ago, Mr. Paul Chan, the FS, told us about the latest GDP figures. For the first time, our GDP contracted by 8.9%. And then for retail and export and imports, the fall is even more remarkable or significant, in fact more than 10%. Of course, we can't sort of tell how bad the economy will become at the end of the year. But just for the figures in relation to the first quarter, it will make everybody worry. There will be waves of unemployment, there will be waves of business closures, and they will be beyond our imagination. You may think that I'm talking about the budget, the economic performance. The point I want to drive is that if you rely on 30,000 police officers to maintain order, even if you increase that number by threefold, you are not going to keep order in Hong Kong. That's because poverty is descending on the city. Now, we're supposed to fight the epidemic. Now, we have got a man putting up a show that he's going to work because the wife is at home to take care of the children. This man put up a show saying that he is going to work. You can anticipate a wave of suicides. We've got 2 rounds of anti-epidemic fund. It's impossible to imagine that Dr. Lo Chi-kwong has not thought about this, that is, suicides. Now you say that lawmakers would only be criticizing the police for brutality, for corruption, etc., etc. Well, for many times I've been telling you that let's set aside our differences. No, it's crazy to make such a recommendation. But then there will be chaos. If there are still opportunities, how are we going to position ourselves? Last year, I already told you that we have this US-China trade war. We were caught by surprise that Hong Kong became the battlefield because of the Fugitive Offenders Bill. Now, the trade war hasn't ended. We don't know about the political repercussions. Now, this moment, probably you're thinking about reshuffling the cabinet, but you need to prepare for an economic depression. But then, I don't know what our officials are thinking, but let me give you an example. Recession or even depression is descending. I think the people know full well what the consequences are like. Probably many of us have neglected a particular news story, but in Frank Chen, New World Ferry has a large number of its shares being purchased by Zhujiang ferries. Well, as far as the inter-island ferry service, it's never been attractive. Even for ferry service to and from Discovery Bay has not been attractive. Now, for micro and small and medium enterprises, they're all having a hard time. But who's waiting to take over them? Let me give you another example. For the past 10, 20 years, the case of the link route was clear. Well, in the first stage, we talked about how the link route eroded our public assets. I haven't digressed, Mr. Chairman. Now, the link became a listed enterprise. It's further and further away public assets. And then it now appears that we have got a second round of opportunities. For public housing estates, the shop spaces have been turned into homes for the elderly or or the school premises for international school. Now, it isn't just a matter of the major enterprises or major businesses being taken over, and we are talking about general SMEs. So we need to back this question. There is a crisis looming. We have economic depression. How can we make sure that people can still make their ends meet? Last week, I talked about licensing. I think it doesn't matter if you don't give money to the FGHD. In the past, we lost all the traffic lights, but life went on. It doesn't matter. But in the future, we don't know how bad the depression is like, but I can tell you what the outcome would be like, and with certainty. For the past 6 months or so, Maxim's group, City Super, among other major corporations, I think very soon they will be taken over. Probably only 30–40% of our businesses will still be kept in local hands. It has become a political epidemic because we'll be reddened. And even for general civilian businesses, they will be affected if you don't have the awareness that we can't make a living just by going around to a corner grocery shop, for example. Then one day we'll find that 90% of the businesses will be Chinese funded. And that's the worst case. And we will be left with little room to survive. Mr. Chairman, you're a businessman. If you understand what I'm talking about, if you have the middle class, they can't move away and they have no means to defend themselves, then I want to say that the local economy will be the only thing that we can count on while we are caught in the midst of the US-China trade war. I think we can just make use of administrative means to revitalize the sector. It doesn't involve anything up north. I just hope that you will give us some room to move around. Meeting suspended, and we will resume at 9 o'clock tomorrow.